Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our mid-afternoon Bible class. It's a beautiful day here in Chicago, not too hot, not too cold. We need a little some on your sleeves though here in Chicago because it's a little some in the air, but that's all right. I love this time of the year. This type of weather usually don't come to around September. But hey, I take it right now. It's a beautiful thing. Nice breeze. And it ain't too cold, ain't too hot. So that's all right. So we're out here in the elements thanking the Lord. So welcome to our mid-afternoon Bible class. And we're going to give a few minutes for people to come on in. And then we're going to get started. We're going to get started with our Bible class after we give people a few minutes to come on in. I hope everyone is doing all right this afternoon. We'll be back, Lord willing, at 7 o'clock for the night people. And then we'll be done, Lord willing, at 7:30 so we can watch that basketball game. Because I like watching it too, so I know you like watching it. And so we're going to work it out together so we both can be there to watch it. All right. So we're going to give another minute for people to come on in. We've been off. Last week we were off. Last week was Love on Your Wife week. So we were off last week as we talked about love on your wife. That's something we need to do. It don't need to be just a week. It need to be a everyday thing. Just like we love on one another, Jesus said, "Love you one another." We need to love our wives daily, daily, not just a weekly thing. But I do a weekly thing to put emphasis on it to try to help others be part of it. Because some of us men are not stepping up to where we should be stepping up to when it comes to loving our wives. And so some of us need a little help, a little boost, a little push. So we're going to get started with our Bible class, our mid-afternoon Bible class. And today we're talking about swimming to Jesus. We're talking about swimming to Jesus, and our text, our Bible scripture is coming from the book of John, chapter 21, verses 1 through 13. John 21, 1 through 13. Let me see if I can share my Bible with you. For those who don't have a Bible, see if I can share my Bible. All right. Yeah, there we go. All right, there's my Bible. So we're going to share my Bible. Here's our Bible. There's my Bible, the Olive Tree Bible. We're sharing it with you. So we're in John chapter 21, starting at the first verse. We're talking about swimming to Jesus. All right. And so let's look at this first verse. But before we get started, why are we talking about swimming? Well, you're going to see in this scripture Peter swim. He swam to Jesus. And what is swimming doing? Swimming is parting the waters. You have to part the waters in order to swim. If those waters don't part, you ain't going nowhere. It's just like when somebody dives. If they don't dive in a way to part the water, then smack. It could kill them. It could knock them out. So you got to part the waters. Even when it came to the children of Israel leaving the land of Egypt, the waters of the Red Sea had to be parted in order for them to get to the promised land. So the waters got to be parted. Aren't you looking for your promise? Ain't you trying to get to your blessings? Well, you're going to have to part some waters. You're going to need God to part you some waters. And you might have to do like Peter in this here, part them yourself. And so we're going to get into later why we need to part the waters. But you got to part the waters. And so, first of all, let's look at our first verse here. Verse 1. He said, after these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and on this wise showed he himself. Now we're getting ready to show you. How did he show himself? Where there were together Simon Peter, Thomas, and Didymus. Thomas that was called Didymus, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and two other of his disciples were gathered together. And Peter said unto them, I'm finna go fishing. He said, I'm finna go fishing. So they said to him, well, we're going to go with you. So they all went fishing. They went forth and entered into a ship. They got on a boat, went fishing. And notice that boats have a sharp point. Why? So they can part the waters. It's very important that you part the waters. You can't just get in there and just go. You got to part the waters. So that's why boats are made with a sharp point to part the waters. That's why fish have fins on their backs, on some of their sides, however, to part the water. They have it on their tails to part the water. So you got to part the water. So here it is. They all said, we're going to go fishing. Good afternoon to my cousin Sharon. God bless you this afternoon. So they said, we're going to go fishing. Everybody, Peter said it first. And so they said, yeah, we're going with you. So they got in a boat. And that night, they caught nothing. They caught nothing. Verse 4 it said, but when the morning was now come, Jesus stood. In that verse 4. You see it there? But when the morning was now come, Jesus stood on the shore. But the disciples knew not that it was Jesus. Here it is. Jesus is standing on the shore, but they didn't recognize him. And so that's what we also want to talk about. Do you recognize Jesus? Do you recognize Jesus? Because he's here. He's on the shore. He's bringing healing, deliverance, miracles into our lives. It's right around us. But do you recognize it? Too many times we are focused on the wrong thing and we miss Jesus. Why? Because many of us want him to come in the way that we want him to come. Everybody else say he should come a certain way, so we get caught up in it looking for the way that others say. But if you want to see Jesus, you got to get out of yourself if you want to recognize Jesus. So here it is. Jesus was on the shore, and none of them recognized him. Do you recognize Jesus in your life? He don't always come, you know, as a church, nice saint, church person. He could be that person on the street corner just asking for some money. He could walk past you as that drunkard, that person strung out on drugs. Jesus can use them. So when you're talking to them, you might be talking to Jesus. Jesus can use anybody. He used a donkey to talk to Balaam. Balaam was of the same idea as we are. Who are you? You just a donkey. How you gonna tell me something? I'm your master. So he didn't want to listen to the donkey. I don't expect no Jesus to be coming from no donkey. That's what's wrong with our world. We try to put Jesus in a box. Jesus can come however he want to come. For Hosea, it came in a prostitute. He had to marry a prostitute. God has us doing all kind of things. Jesus comes in many different ways. He asked his disciples, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? They ain't know. If they think like we do, they think, oh, well, the pastor, the bishop, the evangelist, the mothers that's been there 30, 40 years, the deacons that's been there 50, 60 years. We think they the greatest, but no. He went and got a little child and set that little child amongst them and says, of such is the kingdom of heaven. A little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. You see, God don't think like we think. So do you recognize Jesus when he talking to you, when he's speaking to you? You got to get away from yourself and be able to see him in all kind of ways. Do you recognize it? So here in verse 4, John 21:4, they didn't recognize him. So it goes on, verse 5, it said, then Jesus said unto them, children, have you any meat? They answered him, no. They still don't know who they talking to. They still don't recognize him. And he said unto them, well, cast the net on the right side of the ship, and you're going to find some fish. They'd have been out there all night, and they ain't found nothing. So they obeyed. You got to obey. Even when you don't understand. Even when you don't know this person that's talking to you. But if they speaking the truth, if they ain't trying to hurt you no kind of way, then be obedient. So they was obedient. And they cast their net on the right side. And it said that they were able to draw it. They weren't able to draw it out. There was so many fish got caught in that net that they couldn't draw it out. Wait a minute, what's going on here? All of these fish, we've been fishing all night long, and we can't catch nothing. And then verse 7, one of the disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, he started thinking, wait a minute, this sounds like something that happened before. There was another occasion where Jesus told them to launch back out there. They had been fishing all night long and they didn't catch nothing. And Jesus told them to go back out there. Peter said, we've been out there all night and we ain't caught nothing. But at your word, nevertheless, at your word, we'll go back. And so this disciple started thinking, whoa, we've been here before. And you ought to start thinking. Sometimes we forget, but then you ought to start remembering, thinking, wait a minute, this ain't normal. And so he said to Peter, he said, that's the Lord. He recognized, he was the first one to recognize him. The one that used to lay in Jesus' lap all the time. The one that Peter used to talk about what he gonna do. He ain't doing nothing, and Jesus made Peter leave him alone. He the first one to recognize Jesus. Sometimes the people who we put down, we think are the less. That little child who we don't think nothing of, Jesus said they the greatest. They'll recognize Jesus before we do. They recognize love before we do. Once we get on up in age, we get caught up in race, in color, in riches and poor, in dark skin, bright skin, in good hair, bad hair, fat, skinny. All of these biases get caught up in us as we get older. But little children are not born with those biases. And therefore, they can recognize Jesus. They can recognize love right away. Do you recognize Jesus? And so this disciples told Peter, that's Jesus. That's the Lord. And when Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put his fisher's coat on because he ain't even had no clothes on. And he jumped into the water and started swimming toward Jesus. Now he recognized. There's some of us who need some help in recognizing Jesus because we done got away from it. We ain't studying the word like we should not to. We think we got it all. So some of us need a little help. And this disciple, who wasn't a leader like Peter and the rest of the disciples, who just used to lay around on Jesus' lap, he recognized Jesus first. I remember growing up, my dad used to say that disciple that laid on Jesus' lap all the time was like somebody that have autism. He was different from the rest of the disciples. And so Jesus made Peter leave him alone. He said, if he don't do nothing, what is that to you? You do what I tell you to do. So this disciple was a little different. He just laid on Jesus' lap all the time, kind of like those with autism. But he recognized Jesus. And that's why they called him the disciple whom Jesus loved. Why? Because he was different. He didn't have all the mental and capabilities that we have, the physical capabilities that we have, people with autism. And so Jesus catered to him more. That's why they called him the disciple that Jesus loved. And that's what we got to do. Recognize some people are not the same as others, and they need more love than others. Some of our children need more love than other of our children, and we got to recognize that. And so this disciple recognized Jesus, and Peter jumped in the water and started swimming toward Jesus. And that's what we need to do. Start swimming toward Jesus once you recognize him. Start swimming toward Jesus, because when you swim toward Jesus, you're swimming to safety. You got to realize that where you at is not in a good place if you're not with Jesus. Where you at is a dangerous place if you're not with Jesus. Jesus was over there on the shore. They was out here in another place in the water. So they had to realize that they needed to get to Jesus. And we need to realize that we need to get to Jesus. That's our safety. Like David used to say, hide me under the wings, under the shadow of your wings. That's where safety is at. In God's tabernacle, that's where safety is at. So we need to get to Jesus to get to that safe place. He said he'll keep in perfect peace all who keep their mind stayed on him. So we need to get to Jesus because depression is out here. All kind of stuff is out here in this water, separating us from Jesus. Anxiety is out here in this water, separating us from Jesus. The trials and tribulations of this world are out here in this water, separating us from Jesus. Evil people, racism, crime, and all of that is out here, separating us from Jesus. We need to make our way to Jesus. The only safe place is in the arms of Jesus. And so we need to recognize that. Too many of us are caught up in the world, think we got it made because we got money in our pocket. But money without Jesus is no good. We think we got it made because we got a title. But a title without Jesus is no good. And I'm talking about pastors. I'm talking about bishops, evangelists. A title is nothing without Jesus. You can go to all kind of theological schools, but your title, your certificate means nothing without Jesus. Your bachelor's degree means nothing without Jesus. Your PhD means nothing without Jesus. Degrees mean nothing without Jesus. And so we need to realize that we need to get to Jesus. We need to realize that we need him in our lives. It's okay to raise your children to go to school, to good grades in school. But we're not raising our children to fear God. We're not raising our children to realize that they need God in their lives. And so therefore we find our children just out here doing all kind of crazy stuff because there's no fear of God in them. And so we need to raise our children in the admonition of the Lord, to be God-fearing children, to recognize Jesus in their lives. For the only safety, the only success in life is through Jesus. So we need to do like Peter and the rest of the disciples, start making our way to Jesus. I think it said that Peter started swimming. But in the 8th verse, we're going to stop here. It said the other disciples came in a little ship. They weren't far from the land, it said. And they came dragging the net with the fishes. So make your way to Jesus. However, you might have to jump in the water and go to swimming like Peter. That's still part in the water. You might be in the boat like the rest of the disciples, but that boat got to have that sharp point to part the waters. You got to part the waters because we're trying to make our way to Jesus. So you got to part them waters. Them waters are the trials and tribulations in life, the racism, the ugly hate that we got to deal with, the biases of the world. Those are in the water, and we got to part those waters as we make our way to Jesus. And we're going to talk about next week, we're going to go into detail of what are you parting when you part the waters. We're going to go deeper into what you are parting. But you got to recognize that Jesus is on the shore. Do you recognize that Jesus is in your life? Don't get caught up of looking at Jesus in a certain way. Our churches are so traditional that they don't see Jesus. They caught up in doing things a certain way that when the young people comes with something different, we don't want to hear them. We don't want to listen to them. So we got to recognize Jesus He comes in different ways. He ain't about black. He ain't about white. He ain't about young. He ain't about old. But it's about recognizing the truth, however it comes. So, can you recognize the truth? Because Jesus is the truth. When you recognize the truth, you recognize Jesus. Jesus is the truth. So, we're going to stop here this afternoon. Thank you, Cousin Sharon, for being with us this afternoon. Thank you, and those who may stop by later, thank you. We'll be back, Lord willing, 7 o'clock tonight and get in Bible class before the game starts. You have a blessed afternoon, Sharon. Thank you for being with us. Remember, trust the process and keep God first. Thank you to you all. Thank you. Thank